So our purpose for gathering today is to talk about why every one of you on here today for your church and possibly for your own personal brand needs a communication crisis plan. And so we're going to talk specifically about, exactly what is a communication crisis versus other types of crisis elements, if that makes sense. So communication crisis is designed to protect your reputation. It is designed to have your public, your audiences think of you in a positive way, to have positive affirmation and what might you call brand loyalty of thinking and considering your church. Different types of communication crisis could be varied, and I wanted to touch on that because it might not be just a social media post, or it might not be just a news story that's developing from something that you did in a positive manner as a ministry in your community. We're going to go through and discuss some of the different potentials of what exactly is a communication crisis first. It can be based on this picture right here. This is COVID. Your communication regarding COVID was crisis communication. It was informative. I hope for most of you, for all of you, that it was timely, that it was true, and that it was all done with love. And so that was a big communication crisis that we all experienced together over the last 18 months, and yet it still goes on. Some other examples of communication crisis could be when there's any kind of disconnect in your church, whether it be a public feud that is going on between family members in your church, whether it is a staff issue. There could be an issue with the pastor, something going on in her or his personal life that is causing a disconnect. It could be something involving legality or violence, or all of the ugly things that none of us want to think about and none of us think are going to happen to us. So I thought I would share with you a little bit, this is just a very informal graph about I wanted you to know what some of the crisis communication issues, plans that have gone out this year have been revolved around. So the largest, the biggest opportunity for a crisis communication is by the social media community. This is where there is so much unknown, and this is, unfortunately, when you're in it, it is very, 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 very miserable and very time consuming, especially if you don't have a plan of action on how to address it and move forward. So that by far is the largest amount of our crisis communication campaigns have been revolved around social media posts by people in communities. Also, the local church, and these are all local church. These are all local church crisis situations where I have coached, or I have just been aware of, or whatever the situation. Um, Probably the next thing, the next category would be very uncontrolled situations that happen, a random act of violence, health emergencies. We're all very familiar with, I remember when COVID first broke out, and it was international, at least national news, if someone in your church got COVID. That was big news, and the media was looking for those stories, and we were all trying to avoid that. Very much so, but that has changed a little bit because that happens more often now. And we have had several churches in the media that have been able to actually give a positive outcome on the story and on the coverage for this. So one of the lower categories that had fewer amounts of cases were information shared by the community with the media. That when people in your community or even within your church bypass you, or they're not patient, or for whatever reason, they go straight to the local newspaper, or they go straight to the local television station. And so that has been, we've seen several of those. And then also following up the last, but is a significant, wanted to, be sure and share it, are crises that have arisen because of social media sharing by church leadership or staff. We forget sometimes that as the leaders of the church, or if you are serving at a church in a staff capacity, you represent that church, and you are, as we would call, an influencer. And so sometimes when what you post or your staff posts don't align with your church's messaging, or the book of discipline, or anything that usually keeps us in check, that is where we tend to get in trouble. So we're going to talk a little bit about a crisis communication plan and some different elements of just, the important reasons for why you need a communication plan, and just kind of, like I said, the top shelf pieces that if you have these, you're going to be set. We have, and Jacob, I had this in my notes, but I don't have the link in front of me. We have a link on our communication resources page that links to a United Methodist communication template for creating a crisis communication plan. I'm not super crazy about it. It needs to be updated, but they have not updated anything anytime soon. I am making a recommendation for our cabinet to adopt a new crisis communication plan template that is a whole lot more simplified. However, this one is very thorough. Very, very, very thorough, and it doesn't have anything incorrect or anything like that, but I just feel like it can be tightened up a whole lot. So anyway, please, if you don't mind, Jacob, if you'll put that in the chat for people, if you'll go ahead and click on it, and that way when you leave the webinar, it'll be in a tab already open for you. But if you don't have any kind of template and you're wanting to move on this quickly, I highly recommend that you go ahead and use the UMCOM crisis communication plan template that has been provided. So just a few, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That is now in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. So, a few high points of a crisis communication plan is, one of the things that sometimes we skip over, or we get to the end and we go, no, wait, why are we, when there's so many straggling ends, or there's so many unanswered questions, or we go off on these side roads or grassy area, it's because we didn't define our reason in the first place. We didn't say, okay, this is why we need this. This is what we plan to do with this. And make sure that it aligns with your current church's mission statement or vision statement. You want to, this is how you plan to communicate those sensitive and oftentimes difficult messages. And as always, you want to be, all of our communication wants to be clear and concise, truthful, and kind. So that is the first element, is asking and defining and putting it in a file for, this is the purpose for this. So then the next step is, define your audiences and platforms. This is also another step that sometimes we skip over. When we get to, we need to notify people that there was a car accident in our parking lot, that someone got hurt. I'm just making something up. And children were present from our daycare. So that's a whole lot of audiences, y'all. That is not just an email out to everybody. That is not just if you do the text messaging systems, that's not just a text message or a social media post. That is, so if you already know already that, okay, so for in our church, we have senior ministries, we have women's ministries, we have men's ministries, we have youth ministry, we have children's ministry, and we also have daycare ministry. This covers about all of your age groups, and you can also, of course, you've got just your regular full subscriber list for your email, but sometimes it doesn't need to just go out mass. So having these audiences just identified that, okay, so there was a wreck in the parking lot, and our children in our child care were there, and one of them was even in an accident with a custodial parent. This is something that we need to, if you already have all of your audiences, okay, first of all, you're going to notify daycare families, right? You're going to notify staff. You're going to want to post in the Facebook group that is just for the daycare. So, these are just, top level points, but knowing all of the different audiences and having those defined will save you so much trouble, and also prevents, because when you're in the midst of a crisis, to not have to think and plan these pieces is huge, because time is always of the essence. Also in this part of your plan, don't leave out talking points. If this is something that your whole staff in talking with your congregants or anybody that is going to be asking questions, you need to provide talking points. You need to let them know, what needs to be said. Here are the 3 points. That's it. And so having that identified and know, okay, we've got to jot down some talking points really quickly. So, if you have a text messaging platform, you probably have a website already, and of course your social media, because all of those pieces may not be the same message. You may not need to send the same message across all of these platforms and to all of the audiences. They may, the message that you're going to send to your daycare family is going to be different than the message that you're going to send to your church, to your congregation. Hope you understand that. All right. Then you need to create your team. You need to create your crisis communication team. Of course, your executive leadership team, which I'm sure is clergy and laity, whatever that may be in your ministry setting. If you have a communication person, or if your administrative assistant is your communication person, they need to be part of this team. I always recommend having someone who is in the legal field. And if you possibly have someone that works in PR, then that of course is a gold mine. So I absolutely invite them to be part of this team as well. And most importantly, your district superintendent. Always, always, always. So this is a part of having a communication plan, crisis communication plan, that people find to be difficult. But it's very important. It's very important when you are able to plan ahead and be thinking ahead if possible, because we always want to, in our communication, as much as possible, we want to be proactive instead of reactive. And unfortunately, a lot of times we have to be reactive. It's not our fault, but sometimes if we are aware of situations or issues that are brewing, it could be divorce. It could be child custody. It could be a family quarrel over a will. I mean, y'all know the list could go on and on and on. It could be, a political divideness between people who want to wear masks and people who don't. Yeah. Any of these things, any things like that you see could very well, if worst case scenario, that if somebody decides to call out somebody else on a public platform, or words come to blows, or whatever, worst case scenario there, if you are aware of the situation and you've been processing the situation and monitoring the situation, the ability to handle whatever kind of crisis outcome happens, you're going to be that much better. You're going to be in a much better position to address the situation and communicate more so than if you just kind of put it in a jar and put it on a shelf, which is so often what we want to do. And I know that we cross a line of not wanting to gossip, not wanting this to be, we've laity that are on here. I know you all have been in those groups where you say, okay, these are prayer concerns, but it feels a lot like gossip. And so that is to be commended. We do not want this to be a gossip session amongst your executive team, your crisis communication team, but these things need to be addressed and not just identified, but monitored, and to keep your DS aware of the situation and any changes in the situation, so that he or she, that this is not something that just blindsides them as well. Okay. Activation of your plan. Something has happened and you have a crisis, and you have to be ready. You have to know who to call. You have to have all of the numbers updated in a place where everyone has access to it who answers a phone. You need to have all the cell phone numbers of the people on your committee team in your phone, so that you can call at just a moment's notice, and same with them. So be ready with your plan, be connected. When there is a crisis, you as a team are going to have to define who, what, when, why, where, and how. And like I said a minute ago, you're going to have to, once again, evaluate and speculate on where this could possibly go next. We have no way of telling, but when you know the players or know what's about to happen, you can do that. So, and that is very important. Ask yourself, is the media involved? Is the has the news station called you? And then, of course, always define the next steps, and determine and define the next steps. When we offer information or messaging regarding a crisis, it's always best to have and here's the information, here's the situation, and we would like for you to, so that there's a call to action, so that this is what we would like for you to do with this information, whether it be pray over this family, pray over our church, gather at the fellowship hall on Sunday at 2. Whatever the call to action is, that is always a good thing, because people will be looking to do something or say something or share something. And so giving them specific call to action is always a good thing. All righty. When we've been talking, and when I showed you the chart with the different levels or examples, I should say, of different crisis communication campaigns that we have had this year, you saw that a lot of it has to do with social media, right? And so I'm going to share with you a little bit. You should pretty much well know how to set up a plan, be prepared. Always call your DS, plug that forever. Always call your DS and keep them informed, because they will then pull me in if needed. And my position as a conference communicator, I communicate about the conference. That is all that I do. I do not do local church matters. That is up to you. But what I can do, and what my crisis communication team can do, is we can coach you. But we can't do it for you. So your DS will bring me in when it is time, but oftentimes I might be the one that is calling you. So sometimes it works in a great way of, what's going on, you notify your DS, they notify me, but sometimes nobody knows what's going on, and someone calls me from Texas and says, I just saw this in the news and thought you might want to know. So anyway, who will be the person to call? Thank you, Sherry. I see your question. Who will be the person to call the DS when it is time to? It should be you. It should be, which Sherry is a ministry coordinator for the conference for VIM and disaster recovery. It should be you. And if you are in your conference position, Sherry, then you will need to call the bishop. You'll need to call Jim and the bishop. If you are working in your local church capacity, you will need to call your DS. But all district and conference teams need to just reach out directly to their director and the bishop. Okay, thank you. Good deal. You're welcome. So we're going to talk a little bit, and it's not rocket science, but it is unfortunately something not very easy. And I'm going to try to unshare my screen here. Sorry. Stop share. There we go. Okay, I'm sorry. But when it comes to social media, it's just like everything else that we do. We want to do no harm. We want to be kind. We want to be truthful. We want to be timely. And we want to be consistent. We want to be consistent with our follow-up and with any kind of posting that we're doing. We talked a minute ago about that you as a pastor and as a church leader are what's called a influencer. You are a social media influencer. Whether you like it or not, you are a community leader. And so people look to you as a community leader, whether it is a community of faith or whether it is an actual, this is who we admire in our community, mayor, sheriff, and church leaders. So you are an influencer. And so it's very important that you not just protect your church's brand and identity on social media, but it's also very important for you to protect your personal brand and identity on social media. Because if you have a social media issue, your church has a social media issue, okay? Which doesn't always happen in the reverse. Your church can have a social media issue and it doesn't reflect on your personal social media. But if you have a social media crisis, your church absolutely is going to be reflected on your church. So just be aware of that. That's a big responsibility. And so I just want to give you a few reminders as tips for when you are sharing on social media and communicating in different ways. If you do not have to use Facebook messaging, leaders, don't. People can misconstrue Facebook messaging, text messaging, anything that is a private message. Sometimes that can be misconstrued. Highly recommend that you stick to email. Keep it professional, stick to email. But if you have that relationship with your lay leader or with your assistant, or, you know the boundaries there, but with parishioners or, members of the community, I would recommend that you try to limit Facebook messaging or any other kind of Snapchat messaging or any kind of private messaging. And I would keep that. And I would just say that you need to recommend to them that y'all communicate via email or that you don't do Facebook messages anymore. It just keeps it professional, and it also keeps it safe. It keeps a record of all of your conversations, and you are safe there. I would also recommend that of course, that you are in, I don't want to say cahoots, but that you are in communication with your staff about if there is anything that could be potentially an issue. That you keep hearing that there's going to be a protest or that someone is upset because of something. That is one of the times to make sure that everybody is aware, and to prepare them as well, to prepare your staff, because like I said earlier, they are influencers, community influencers that reflect on the church as well. This also includes private groups, and it also includes separate pages within your church's network of social media, if that makes sense. I was also going to add that we have discussed this before, but one of the things that we've had some issues with is people who are influencers who like and follow particular political groups, not legal groups. I don't even have examples to share, but just be aware that if you follow a group, even if you don't join it and become part of it and never mention anything, but the fact that you hit follow on that, people can see that you are following this group, which a follow usually means support. You are following them because you support that organization. So if there is anything on your social media that that you have, that you follow, that you maintain, just ask yourself, comb through all of those. Do a good social media scrub and ask yourself for every single one of the groups that you like, that you follow or like. Ask, does this match the vision of my church? Does this match the mission of my church? Does this do no harm match, our United Methodist wording and messaging and good deeds to live by? So go through, ask that, because a lot of times we get into trouble, pastors, hear me. A lot of times we get into trouble when we make the assumption that our entire congregation thinks and feels the same way that we do about political issues, about health issues, about local community issues. Just be very careful. It is never our intention, and I know that, it is never our intention to put something out there or just be a part, guilt by association, of something that is hurtful and harmful to someone else. So just be very aware of that. Be careful what you share. Videos and photos and things are great. But remember, we talked about truth. Make sure that what you share is truthful. Make sure that it does no harm. Make sure that it is going to uplift people and that it is part of your vision and mission of your church, and not just some random thing that you felt like was a good message. I will share with you quickly that where we get into trouble sometimes is sharing pieces from news agencies that aren't really news agencies. That when we go into when we see something has been created that says something that we feel very passionate about, check to see who created that graphic. Where did that graphic come from? Who is reporting it? Does the title match the content after you've clicked on it? Because there are people that are paid very well to create titles for things to get people to click on that don't match the content on the inside. So be very careful. Also be careful of sharing news. Cable channels are cable channels, and they report news as they are sharing information with audiences that pay for advertising. That's how our media works. It's not so much. Some news is Walter Cronkite, but a lot of our news is not. It's very much based on idea, speculation, emotion, feelings, fear. This is what I think. So a cable channel is geared toward a specific audience. It's just like HGTV. cable network. It's just like MTV cable network. Those cable networks are geared towards specific audiences. So just be very careful about what, if you share something, and talk to me offline. I'll be glad to point you in a direction for where our non-biased news can be found. Okay, I'll be glad to share that. Print media is the best. So, but talk to me offline about that. So be aware of what you share. Make sure it is truthful. People are paid really good money to create memes that just take a line out of something and then stick someone's name on it, or even to just create a, man, I wish that this would happen. You know, they create this meme and then they get paid for it. Has no source, no truth. It's somebody's idea, and they get paid every time it gets shared. So just be aware of that. Also, another little tidbit about media is know that lobby groups, if you ever watch one of the live, presidential hearings, or when our governor speaks in the afternoon, sometimes when he gives a report, and you see all of the comments in the Facebook post, know that so many of those people are being paid. Those are people that are working for lobby groups, and they are being paid to create disruption. And so just be aware that there is a whole world out there that we can't even imagine exists, but they do. So like I said, when you're sharing truthful things, be very careful and do your diligent research to make sure it really is from a verified source, because we've had several instances of crisis due to that. Be careful sharing photos. Be careful sharing photos with people who you don't have their approval to share their photos. Be careful sharing photos of children, even if they're children within your church, even if you know their mom and daddy and they are your next door neighbors. You have to have their permission first before you share pictures of children. Avoid Snapchat. Just avoid it. Avoid it. It's the premise for Snapchat was not set up to be utilized by churches, and it's still we've been researching, but we're not exactly sure if it even meets the safe sanctuary standards as far as communicating with children. So avoid it. I'm trying to think of anything else social media tips as far as how to avoid a crisis in the first place. Jacob, do you have anything else? Have I skipped anything? Missed anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I have a question. Hey, bud. In a situation that has legal or criminal implications, in what situations does the church limit its communication? Is there always one designated spokesperson for the church? And at which point is that responsibility passed to the DS or conference communicator? That's a great question. So in any legal or criminal matter with your church, you are going to want to work with your DS and your lawyer. Every church should have a lawyer, whether it's, I don't know how whether it's on a retainer. I hope you don't have to have a retainer, but you need to have a lawyer on your crisis communication team, and in other areas too that your DS can probably talk to you about that. But always have a lawyer, and do what they say. Have a lawyer and do what they say. As far as spokesperson, yes, you need to have a spokesperson. And when you are creating your plan, but usually that's going to be you as the senior pastor. If this is a local church matter, if this is a matter that involves Fort Smith First, or a person from Fort Smith Church, Fort Smith First, you will be the spokesperson. If for some awful reason that you cannot be the spokesperson, and it is still a local church matter, then you, I mean, and this goes for anything, there always needs to be a backup for everything. There always needs to be spokesperson number 1 and spokesperson number 2. And so when your DS comes in to be any kind, if they are a spokesperson, is when it is a district-wide matter. If there is a problem with multiple churches in the district, if there is a district issue, that is when your DS is going to be the spokesperson. If it is a conference-related issue, then Bishop is a spokesperson and I am a spokesperson for the conference. Most of the time, and I know y'all don't want to hear this, but most of the time, most of these crises are local church crises. And so therefore, you are going to be the lead on this. Now, like I said earlier, you will not be alone. You will have your DS's support. You will have the conference support and any kind of PR coaching that I can help with, and look over things with you, and tighten some things up before you send it out. I mean, that's absolutely, we will absolutely support you with that, but you will have to be the spokesperson when dealing with the media. So and dealing with the media has changed a lot, and I'll just share, while we're talking about it, talking to the media has changed even over the last 2 years, even through COVID. So often reporters now will reach out and they are okay with you not being on camera. And that's usually what I recommend to all of my clergy, unless it's something really exciting and you're promoting an event, or you've got something, real fun really going on. And, then of course you want to be on camera. But if this is an issue, if this is a crisis, I'm about 99% sure that you do not need to offer a live interview. In situations like that, you will, with my coaching, you will request questions from the reporter via email, and you will submit answers to the reporter via email. You do not have to do, they are looking for a story, and they have a deadline. And so, yes, they're going to want to interview you live, and they're going to want some B-roll. And if they would like to, come and get, some video out, outside of the church, then, and you're okay with that, that's fine. But you do not have to, and in fact, I wouldn't recommend it, do a live interview on the phone or via Zoom or even in person with a reporter, especially if it is regarding a crisis. So way too much room for error there. Way too much room for error. My hope is, and I want to, we've touched high points today, and we've touched the stressors as far as dealing with the crisis, but so often the situations that we become aware of when we can be proactive, the situations like child custody or an ugly divorce or, whatever, most of the time they take care of themselves. It takes care of itself, and you continue to be a pastoral leader, and the image of the church, your image, is not damaged in any way. And so, this is not like something that happens all the time, but when you have it happen one time, that's enough. And so it is, and I have had everyone say that I have ever worked with that they had wished that they had had a plan beforehand. They wish that they had a plan. They wish that they would have known, because when you're in the middle of a crisis, a communication crisis, especially with social media, minutes are like hours and hours are like days. And every situation is different. There are some old webinars that we have done specifically on social media and building your brand, your personal brand and your church brand through social media. Those are on the website. If you just put in the search bar webinars, and you'll be able to find them. Day Davis and I offered those last summer, winter, I can't remember, for each district, and they went over really well, and that information is still very relevant. But just know that, oh, thank you, Jacob. And those can be helpful. You can put in earphones and just listen, and they're over in like 45 minutes. So, but the links are there on the website. You're not going to be alone in a crisis. Your DS wants to be aware. Don't wait. Let me just reiterate, do not wait until after the pot has boiled, brewed, and is spilling over to let your DS know what's going on. Because so often everything shifts. Everything has to shift as far as strategy of working through this crisis. And whereas if they are aware of what's going on, they can coach you, they can, come do whatever they do. But knowing when it's just starting to bubble is so much better than when it is all over the stove and dripping onto the floor and has burned your spoon. So highly recommend that if anything today is that you take away is bring your DS in early. That is about all that I have. I would love to open the floor up for questions. Any further questions? I highly recommend that some things to consider when you are being proactive and you are working through communication coming in, that you make sure that all of your people who answer a telephone are trained to know what to do if it is a call from the media. Sometimes the media might know something's going on before you do. And so just make sure that all of the people who could possibly answer the phone at your church, that they have that they know the chain of command, that of course they are not allowed to say anything, that they send them directly to your administrator or to your voicemail. And that they ask the appropriate questions, so that then you will know what you're walking into. Appropriate questions are, of course, who the reporter is, what station or outlet they're calling from, what time they called, what is their deadline for this story, and what kind of story are they calling about? What kind of information are they looking for? And I'm just kind of, in the weeds here, but just senior pastors know that you never want to take a call from media. You never want to take a call coming in. You always want them to leave a message, and then you call them back every time. Even if it is on an event, even if it is, something great that you're trying to promote, call them back, because chances are you're never just sitting and it's quiet and you're prepared to talk to a reporter. And so do all of those things, and then call them back. So anyway, And in that list, where we have seen some issues before with people answering the phone, that could be a volunteer. If you have, Mr. Maddox that comes in and answers the phone from 10 to 12 on Thursdays, he needs to understand the chain of command if someone from a newspaper or a television station ever calls. You need to make sure that your youth director, if they answer the phone, if someone in the daycare answers the phone, which of course the daycare is going to have their own phone, then they need to know the chain of command. They need to understand, what information needs to be collected and what not to say, and understand the importance of that. That is about it. I think we've made some really good time. I'm going to open up the floor one more time for questions and answers. And while you are considering, if you have a question, I do want to let you know that we are going to be taking crisis communications a little bit further. We're going to dig in a little deeper. We are going to be offering another webinar in September. I don't have that date confirmed yet. We'll send it out, but in September, we will be doing a crisis communication webinar specifically for churches that have daycares. Because this opens a whole other can of communication when you are operating a weekday children's ministry. This adds a whole new audience, and it adds a whole new set of opportunity for crisis communication. Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it. I hope it has been helpful. I have enjoyed being with y'all today. We are always here to help you, always here to provide guidance if you need it. As is your district superintendent. They are there to help you. They are extremely knowledgeable. And many times, if this is a new appointment and it's a brewing situation, they are probably already aware of what was going on before you even got there. But it's good for you to never assume, and to keep them clued in on all of those situations like that. That's all I have today, and I appreciate so much you all being here. Jake, be sure and click on those links that Jacob has shared with you, and they will be open. And I think that's all.